I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times, and welcome to the New York Times Close-Up. This week we examine the political fallout of Zohran Mamdani's election as New York's mayor, President Trump's response, and what's at stake for the city. Metro political reporter Nicholas Fandos explored the surprises of Mamdani's victory and is navigating the complexities of his transition planning. On election night, Mamdani borrowed a line from Mario Cuomo. He said that campaigning is poetry and running the city is prose. What does his campaign suggest so far about how he will run the city?
Well, he came out very quickly after his victory and announced a transition team and then some early appointments. And so I think if we're reading the tea leaves in those, the transition team was a group of 5 women who have worked in nonprofits and in high levels of city government under the last 3 administrations, so kind of an ideological spread. I think that was a signal he was trying to send, that this is going to be an administration of expertise. I know that you think of me as young and a democratic socialist, he seems to be saying, but I'm going to be looking for the very best talent, and they don't need to agree with me on everything. I think in his first major appointments, we saw both of those things present. So he named his longtime right-hand woman, Elle Bisgard Church, who ran his campaign, who's a true believer, a democratic socialist, to be his chief of staff. She'll be at his right side in City Hall. But he named Dean Foulahan to be first deputy mayor. Foulahan served in that role under Bill de Blasio. He was the budget chief under Bill de Blasio. He spent decades in Albany working for Shelley Silver, the assembly speaker, and others. He's a widely respected government operator who, in a way I think that Mamdani's inner circle doesn't really know, knows the ins and outs of government and is, hopefully going to be able to help him do what he'd like to do in City Hall.
For all the people who are skeptical of Mamdani and his lack of experience, that seems to have been a pretty wise choice.
Yeah, I think it goes a long way in kind of calming down, we saw in their responses certain high-level government leaders who maybe are skeptical of him, business leaders as well. He had previously indicated he'd like to keep Jessica Tisch as police commissioner. I think that's been another strong signal. There's a little bit of questioning now. Will that actually work out? Will she really accept the position? But his team seems to be confident she will, and I think that's another kind of powerful signal to his skeptics about what kind of mayor he wants to be.
We're talking before the weekend, so maybe overtaken by events, but why would she not accept the position? Or what does Mamdani have to do to persuade her to accept it?
Well, I think the reason she might is that she's ambitious, she hasn't been in the job that long, she sees opportunities to continue to reform the department in ways she'd like. But remember, these two people have very different beliefs about policing. I mean, he is pretty far to the left. He's been a proponent of cashless bail, raise the age laws in New York City, things that she's railed against. He wants to transform certain parts of the department, create a new Department of Community Safety that would take certain nonviolent responsibilities for nonviolent events away from the police, would she be supportive? So it's kind of in the details of, can their visions really align? And if she were to feel that she had just too many ideological differences, she couldn't get on board with certain things that were priorities for him, conceivably she might say no. I think she'll probably stick with him, but we'll see.
Nick, a lot of the things that were in his platform are things that he is not able to do in terms of governing. Fiscal policy, he has to go to Albany. There are constraints that were imposed during the fiscal crisis.
Of course.
Universal child care, he's got to get money from someplace. Free buses is up to the MTA. Mayoral control of the schools, again, the legislature. How much leeway does he actually have?
Yeah, this I think is going to be one of the key questions of his first year in office. And Mamdani is clearly spending a lot of time on it. I just got back from Puerto Rico where all the New York Democrats decamp after the election, and the governor was there and the mayor, and they clearly were kind of circling each other, trying to feel out where is there areas of common agreement. And so if we're reading the tea leaves right now, it seems the governor is very interested in working with him on the child care component. That's something that's been important to her. She seems less interested in providing money for free buses. Now that's a lot less expensive. Maybe they could work something out. Child care is going to cost a lot of money. He's proposed paying for it by new corporate taxes and raising the income tax. She seems skeptical of the income tax increase, but is leaving a door open maybe on corporate taxes or on some other new funding revenue stream, some other new tax. So, you know, the details are going to be worked out over probably the first 6 months of next year, the legislative session in Albany. But there are signs that there's enough area of agreement that I think they will work something out. The question is what percentage of what he wants and campaigned on will he actually get?
How much money are we talking about roughly?
Well, all in, his team estimates, you know, somewhere between 10 and $15 billion, though outside analysts suggest it could cost more money. And then you started to get into a question, well, if you're going to provide new government-funded child care benefits for New York City, that's not really palatable for the governor. She's got to do it statewide. I think she's estimated that could cost $14–15 billion alone statewide. So we're talking about a lot of money, particularly at a time when the federal government is already clawing back certain funds coming to the state. Mamdani is set to take office and face an immediate deficit. You know, so the conditions are not perhaps what you would want if you were trying to greatly increase government spending.
That's a lot of money to raise, especially for a governor running for re-election.
Absolutely, and a governor who now has a very aggressive Republican opponent who is trying to do everything she can to tie her to Mamdani. I'm talking about Elise Stefanik, the Republican congresswoman. So the governor is headed into headed up to a very high wire, I think, over the next year or so.
Is the Mamdani administration worried about retribution from the White House, from Donald Trump?
They certainly have been preparing for Donald Trump to make New York City, you know, target number one in his kind of campaign against American cities, whether that's the National Guard, whether that's funding streams that get cut. I don't think they exactly know, but they've been trying to draw up plans in conjunction with the governor and others to prepare for that. Yeah, I think it's the way he's spoken about it is that affordability and President Trump are going to be the twin crises, or you could say twin priorities of his administration.
Does he feel there's any way to win Trump over, this being his at least original hometown?
Yeah, it's a good question because the governor has adopted a strategy where, you know, she has gotten some concessions from the president, has a relationship with him. Mamdani came out swinging on election night, though, and basically challenged Trump and said, if you're going to come for New York City, you'll have to go through me. Very adversarial. Whether that was posturing or the totality of the strategy, I don't think we know yet. There's some suggestion the two men may try and talk in the coming weeks. Obviously, we'll be very interested to see how that goes as kind of a litmus test. But I think it's anyone's guess which direction it goes in, other than it's not starting in a great place.
Do we know why Mamdani waited so long to endorse the housing proposals that were on the ballot?
It's a good question. My understanding is that those proposals, which would accelerate or are designed to accelerate housing production, but take certain authorities or safeguards out from the process of approving it, divided the left, and he was not interested in, you know, basically picking a fight with half of his coalition. In the end, he supported the measures. He took a lot of heat for, you know, dithering for so long and not saying what he'd do, but I think it mostly had to do with his relationship with members of the council and not wanting to get the ire of certain parts of the left that oppose these measures.
Senator Schumer did not endorse him ultimately. What impact is that going to have on the senator?
The senator is in quite a precarious position. In some ways, I think it was overtaken, his position on Mamdani was overtaken or confirmed by the end of this government shutdown, which Schumer had helped initiate the shutdown at the behest of the left. He didn't vote to end it, but several members of his caucus did, and that has really infuriated liberals. He's not up for re-election for 4 years. I think he's safe in the Senate leadership job, but the question to me in all of this, and as he didn't endorse Mamdani, I got to say, a lot of people were asking, is Senator Schumer, a fixture in New York politics, really going to be running again in 4 years? If he was, I think we might have expected him to tack more to the left to find a way to, you know, make nice with Mamdani. They're not antagonistic, but we'll see. 4 years is a lot of time. But
it's a lot of time, and also he runs statewide, which is somewhat less liberal than New York City.
That's right. That's right.
What about Hakeem Jeffries? Is he going to get a primary from a Democratic Socialist candidate?
It's looking like Councilmember Chiosei, who was a ally of Mamdani on the campaign trail, is preparing to run against Jeffries in his Brooklyn district. But the interesting wrinkle in this is that Mamdani is against it. And we've reported in the Times, Mamdani is so upset that he's pursuing this that he disinvited Chiosei from his election night victory party. I think the view in Mamdani world is this is just not a fight that's helpful for anyone to pick in this moment. I think Osei is going to be under a lot of pressure to not follow through on this. He's given some indication that he's looking to see whether the DSA will endorse him. If they do, he probably goes forward. If they don't, I could see that challenge folding. The other question is Jeffries vulnerable? In some ways, the results of the mayoral election suggest yes, Mamdani did well in his district. But on the other hand, Jeffries is pretty popular at home, has a strong base of support. Will there really be an appetite to oust the guy who's running to become speaker at the same time? I don't know. We'll find out.
What do you think was most decisive in the mayoral election? We talk about money, debates, TV, unions, social media, endorsements. What made the difference?
Well, I think you've got to, if we look at the turnout in this election, which was really staggering for a municipal election in New York, it was the biggest turnout since, I think, 1969.
When the population was, in fact, lower.
Right, and that's true. Mamdani got over 1 million votes, which hasn't happened, I think, since then.
And got a majority of that.
That, to me, doesn't seem to have to do with endorsements. Super PACs clearly didn't make the difference because Cuomo had all the super PACs. Mamdani didn't have much. Mamdani built a army of volunteers and a turnout apparatus unlike anything I've ever seen in a city election. And, we've talked a lot about the young voters that it brought out, and that was a very big deal. But he was bringing out huge numbers of immigrants, South Asian voters and Muslims who have not been particularly involved in the political process in New York up until now, and I think really added on to his coalition in a compelling way. And I think the ability to kind of bring out those low propensity voters, to inspire some loyalty, that's a really big deal that I think will affect politics in the city going forward.
How did he do it? Was it all social media? Was it all generating enthusiasm? Was it all saying, hey, I'm new and they're not?
I think it was, you've got to say it's a whole host of things. Certainly right now, Democrats are looking for something different than what they've got, and he was the most different candidate in the race. I think he had an economic agenda that was clear and concise. It didn't need translation. You could easily understand it, and he really stuck to that message over and over and over again. He was creative in his social media presence.
He was
built
fun.
This volunteer army, and he was fun. He was a hopeful candidate. New York City's been through, if we pull back a little bit and look at the pandemic, it's been a rough stretch of time in the city, and then the current mayor, Eric Adams, has faced one scandal after another that frankly I think has embarrassed a lot of New Yorkers. And here was somebody who is young, has no skeletons in his closet per se, doesn't have a lot of experience either, but had a set of ideas and an enthusiasm about the city, and I think people really responded to that.
I think you're right. Nicholas Fandos, Metro political reporter of the New York Times. Coming up next, we'll break down President Trump's reaction to New York's new mayor, what it means for the city. Tyler Pager, a White House correspondent for the New York Times. His recent reporting has examined President Trump's response to Zohran Mamdani's election. Tyler, thank you for joining us from Austin, Texas. President Trump has been ambivalent at best to New York City. Is he going to use the election of Mamdani as a foil, or is he going to surprise us and be benevolent to New York City?
Sam, thanks for having me. It's great to be back with you. And that's the big question, I think, pulsing New York City, Washington, and much of the Northeast corridor. The president has threatened time and time again to withhold federal funds from New York City. He has directed White House officials to review all funding that New York City gets from the federal government. But at the same time, the president has business interests in New York City, and he has privately said that Mamdani is a talented politician. And so I think it remains to be seen what sort of levers the president will use to potentially punish New York City for electing Zohran Mamdani, who the president did not want to win. But at the same time, the president doesn't want to see the city be unable to function, as it relies heavily, as all cities do, on some federal funding. So it'll be interesting to see once Zohran is sworn in, what that relationship will look like.
Does he want to punish a city where many of his friends live, his business associates, his bankers? How far would he go and do that?
Yeah, I think, Sam, that is the question. I spoke to John Castimedes, who is a close friend of the president, and he told me that the president wants to see New York succeed. He loves New York City, and we've seen that time and time again. The city is where he was born and raised, and often reflects on throughout his political career. And so I think there is a balance that he's going to have to try to strike between, targeting Mamdani and trying to make him a symbol of the Democratic Party, and also trying to ensure that he does not contribute at all to the city's financial woes should he decide to try to withhold federal funds.
The president has called Mamdani a communist. Does that label stick anymore?
I mean, it's a good question. I think it is salient and resonant for his base. It does not seem that is, it is fear mongering in the way that I think Trump had wanted it to for people in New York. But I think Trump sees Mamdani as a foil for his attacks on the Democratic Party. Nancy Pelosi is stepping down, retiring, and she was often filled that role of fear mongering that the president often does through his politics. Now, AOC, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, is a prime example of the type of politician that Trump targets, and I think he sees an opportunity to do something similarly with Zohran Mamdani and try to tie the broader National Democratic Party to the policies of the mayor-elect.
What's the reaction been in Congress? Are Republicans going to use Mamdani in next year's midterms as a foil? And what about Democrats? Are they afraid of primaries from the left?
I think it's a little bit early to draw sweeping conclusions about the results, but it's clear that members of Congress see an opportunity with Mamdani's election to try to use him in this broader argument that the Democratic Party is a party of far left and socialism. So I think there is some interest from the Republican Party in seeing how Mamdani's early tenure unfolds as the new mayor of America's largest city. But the exact way he might fit into the midterm campaign, I think it's still a little bit early to say. In terms of Democrats, I think there's always concern in the Democratic Party about from many in the Democratic Party about primaries from the left. I think we could see most resonance in New York City, where there are members of Congress who appear to be facing primary challenges from the left, including Dan Goldman, Hakeem Jeffries. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how those races unfold. But it is clear that Zohran's win has excited the left wing of the party, and they seem eager to try to take to knock off some more moderate members of Congress.
Chuck Schumer in a little bit of difficulty, obviously, from letting the shutdown end. Is there any response to his not endorsing Zohran Mamdani?
Yeah, I think we'll see what happens when he's up for re-election. I think there was some concern from the National Democratic Party that Schumer, as the head of the Senate caucus, if he endorsed Mamdani, it would set up even easier attack ads for Republicans to tie him, Mamdani, to Senate candidates in swing states or in red states. And so I think that was part of the calculus. But, I think Republicans will do it anyways. Whether or not Schumer endorsed, I think, doesn't make a whole host of difference. But it'll be interesting to see his relationship with Mamdani as mayor-elect, and just more broadly, the left wing of the party that's very frustrated with Schumer, not just over his refusal to endorse Mamdani, but also the way in which he's handled the shutdown negotiations in Congress.
Tyler, what about the President Trump's endorsement of Andrew Cuomo? It seems a little mysterious here. Was that to help Cuomo or was that to help Mamdani?
I think that the president did not want Mamdani to win the election, and so he saw Cuomo or his advisors and allies really tried to make the case that Cuomo was the best option because he had the most realistic chance of defeating Mamdani. But Cuomo and Trump have their own long, somewhat tortured, unique relationship as well. So there's always a lot of politics to all of these decisions.
Is there anything that Trump likes about Mamdani, other than the fact that? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think in private he has said that Mamdani is has some political skills. He's said that he's slick and a good talker, but I think from a policy perspective, they disagree quite expansively.
New York is represented in Washington more or less by a president, the Senate and House minority leaders. Has New York gotten anything out of those relationships?
I mean, I think it's hard to say exactly what I mean to point out. I mean, both the leaders of the House and Senate are New Yorkers. I don't know that I'm best positioned to pinpoint all of, what exactly New York has gotten, but New York does have powerful representation in Washington.
It's hard to believe that Donald Trump has been president for less than a year, given everything that's happened in these 10 or so months. What can we look forward to in the coming year?
The president and his aides are very concerned about Democrats taking control of the House and stymieing his agenda, launching investigations. They lived through that in his first term after Democrats took control of the House in 2018. So I think there's going to be an increasing domestic policy and politics focus as Trump and his allies and surrogates try to preserve Republican majorities in the House and the Senate.
The president said that Mamdani would be a danger to New York City. Did he have any reaction to the fact that most New York voters disagreed with him?
Look, I think the president has been very clear about what he thinks about Zohran Mamdani and what he describes, as you said, as a threat to New York City. Look, I think the New York electorate is New York City's electorate is not overwhelmingly at all supportive of Trump, quite the opposite. And so it's not surprising that New York voters would disagree with Donald Trump and his endorsement or views on New York City mayoral elections.
Tyler, what about the shutdown? Who is the American public going to blame for that?
I mean, that is a good question. I think we're still just scratching the surface of exactly how the shutdown will play out in politics. I think Democrats would say they feel vindicated by their shutdown strategy based on the results of last week's elections, in which Democrats won the gubernatorial elections in New Jersey, Virginia. They won Prop 15 in California, and they won down ballot races across the country. So I think Democrats feel that the voters are on their side. But I think a lot will happen over the next year before the midterm elections. And so we may not have ever a fully clear answer because obviously voters are not often just single issue voters. And it depends on where the economy is, what other sorts of policies the president has pursued.
This was the longest shutdown in government history. Did it have any real impact on people?
Sure, it had real impact on people that were trying to get food stamps. It had real impacts on air traffic controllers who were working without getting paid. It had real impacts on people whose flights were canceled or delayed and they missed important events or travel. Beyond that, there were many government services that were not functioning during the shutdown. So I think it's impossible to pinpoint all of the different ways the shutdown impacted people's lives, but sure, it had real impact on the lives of Americans.
How worried is the president about the release of the Epstein tapes and documents?
Look, the president has been clear that he thinks that this is, there's nothing there, and he's vindicated, but it is clearly a concern for the White House. They've hosted meetings with members of Congress to try to sway them from not voting for this discharge position related to the Epstein files. And I think it has clearly divided his base, who spent much of the last few years calling for the release of these files, and now has tried to stay aligned with the president, who has not wanted them to be released. So it is clearly a cause of concern and something that is dividing the president's base of supporters.
Why is it that so far none of the allegations have stuck to Donald Trump?
Sorry, say that again?
That none of the allegations so far have stuck to Donald Trump.
I mean, I think it's a hard question to answer. What we know from the files is that Donald Trump had a long, and not even from the files, but the president has talked about this, Donald Trump had a long-standing friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. He was a member of Mar-a-Lago, the president's country club in Florida, and they had a break in their friendship over what the president and his allies say over Epstein's behavior. So in terms of specific allegations, I think what the files are showing is the depth and complexity of that relationship. And I think the lack of clarity about what else might be in the files is what's driving some of this interest.
Thanks to Tyler Pager, White House correspondent of the New York Times. And that's it for this edition of Close Up. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sam Roberts. And don't forget to download the CUNY TV app. You can catch our weekly program anytime, anywhere.